Hey, I'm John Olinger, South Salem High School, class of 2001.
0, 1, 2, 3. Let's get started.
Yeah, today we are joined by 2001 graduate John Olinger. John's years at South were spent with a tight group of friends. He was playing hoops all the time and eventually was a league champion his senior year. He connected with classmates through the peer mentoring program, and he was deeply involved in young life outside of school. After graduation, John went on to play basketball at Willamette University and eventually overseas playing professionally in England. He then spent a decade as a brand and digital marketing leader for Nike and Jordan Brand until 2022 when his life changed drastically. More on that in a moment. John now works as a strategic consultant, executive coach, keynote speaker, and is the CEO and CMO of UNITUS, a faith-forward footwear and apparel brand. He also has a new book that's about to launch on June 10th called Worthy Wins. John and his wife, Erin, live in Florida where they are raising their 3 boys. John, welcome to the show. How is the jumper these days?
Oof. I know I can still shoot because I'm in the driveway with my kids shooting. There's not much jump in the jumper though,
Sure.
at the
Yeah, well,
elevation.
they say that thing never once you have it, it never leaves you. What leaves you is the knees. And I would imagine too. I mean, we grew up. I don't know if you remember this, but man, first grade, I remember running for Salem Track Club, and John Olinger was the guy to be like and to emulate. And I just always admired you from that point forward. And so I'm curious, are you running at all these days, or how are you active?
Oh man, great question there. And of course I remember that, man. I was telling my wife today that I was coming on the podcast and I was like, I've literally known Ryan since I was like 7 or 8 years old. So
Yes.
this has been really fun to get to reconnect a bit with you over email and then get to do this today. From an activity standpoint these days, I work out 5 or 6 days a week. Well, I take that back. I work out 6 days a week. I'm making that statement of just saying that's what I do
Yes.
and not leaving it up to chance. But it's largely just stuff in the gym, staying fit, staying lean, staying healthy. I don't run. I hurt my knee like 2 years ago and have had
Oh,
some meniscus stuff. And so the pounding of running is not out there, but like I feel good. I'm in the driveway with the boys a lot and then just, yeah, trying to be healthy. And so it's less about any one specific thing and more about weights and functional work so that I can just be healthy and well.
same. I turned 40 on Saturday, and I am at that age where I'm like, okay, I got to shift away from what I thought was possible. I broke my nose playing hoops about a year ago, and that was the last phone call home to be like, honey, it happened again. Here's another injury that we got to work through, and I'm headed to the ER. So I retired from any sort of pickup hoops. But yeah, good to reconnect, and appreciate you jumping in today. Let's jump back real quick to your years as a Saxon. How would you describe those years? What do you remember?
Yeah, those years as a Saxon were so special, man. Like that was a really special time of life. And I think when I would imagine most people who are the people in the always a Saxon bucket that are listening, would largely remember like life is really, for the most part, pretty easy and good when you're in high school. It doesn't mean there aren't challenges, responsibilities, and everybody's circumstances are different. But for me, that was a really special time. Amazing friends, amazing place. For me, a life-altering journey with sports that is played such a huge role in what I've gotten to spend my adult life doing. So for me, South Salem High School is such a place that I will remember and cherish and value forever.
I keep hearing that anytime I'm doing these interviews, but what do you think it is that makes South different, South special? I caught the fever as soon as I got hired here 10 years ago. What is it about South?
I think that because it's been, it's the second oldest school in the community, so it's been there a long time. So you're getting a lot of legacy people in there, but it's just had a continued consistency is probably the way I would view it, is it's just had a consistency of people who are kind, who are, want to serve their community and ultimately have had some amazing high achievers have come out of there and done great things. And so I think just the culture collectively, even though it's like seems like it's always revolving of who's leadership and administration, but you keep on having these people that come back every time I go on and I see like who's on a coaching staff or who's on a admin, or like even though you're a convert,
Sure.
to the dark side here. Like I keep seeing names of people that are amazing people, people I love. And then it's funny to like transplant people like Coach Ione into the basketball program, who I spent a lot of time my life with at Willamette and having so it's just I think the people are what make South special. And the people that have been impacted by it seem to be the ones who keep coming back and want to keep investing so that the next generation can have those same kind of experiences.
Yeah, you're spot on. After high school, I know I mentioned you played at Willamette, but you started somewhere else, right? Was it Portland State?
Yeah.
Portland?
I went to Portland State.
That's right.
I was really, really fortunate. I had a great senior year at South, and that opened the door for me to go play at Portland State. And that was the year I spent there was awesome. The coach that recruited me there, though, resigned at the end of my first year. And so I decided to go play junior college at Clackamas Community College. Michael Kubler, who was the class before me, went to Clackamas and was like, "Hey, it's a great place. Go here. They'll treat you well." And so went there. Unfortunately, that experience didn't go exactly as well as Michael's had. I know, and he got injured, and it was just not an awesome year. But that sets the stage for me to come back to Salem and come back to Willamette and play. And I had an awesome, what ended up being 2 more years of undergrad and 2 years of grad school at Willamette and getting to be back in the community. So I feel really, really grateful for the journey I've had.
And then straight overseas to play. What was that experience like?
Basketball overseas is so different depending on which country you're in and each community. And so, I went over and played in England, and in England, basketball is like, not everybody necessarily listening where they can see it like a picture, but if it was a 10 sport totem pole, basketball is like down at number 2 on the very bottom, like right below badminton. When I go over there trying to get in the gym to work out, I'd be having to fight off the badmintoners who were like wanting to take over and have their nets up and stuff. So but it was an awesome experience. And I got to go teach basketball to kids over there, and get to see them come alive and their lives be transformed. Like there was literally like a kid I coached who could not do a layup when I got there. And by the time I left, he was on his way up, and now he's a professional basketball player and he's played all over Europe and all this stuff. And so it was really fun to be able to take something that had impacted my life and then use it to benefit, the next generation of athletes.
I would imagine that was probably part of what propelled you into that next season of life, which was the professional season, working wise, business wise. Was Nike right off? Like, did you get hired right away? Was it that more of a progression as well?
Yeah, that's it. More of a progression as well. It was about almost like a year and a half long journey to finally crack in there. And I had the awesome privilege to be in Salem during that year and a half while I was knocking on doors at Nike. And so I worked at the United Way, did a lot of awesome projects there. Got to launch this thing called 211, which is a resource to help people who didn't know where to turn for help when they were in a time of crisis. So that was a huge blessing to get to do that work. And had just, getting to be back in Salem was great for that season. And then when I cracked in at Nike, I started writing tweets for Nike basketball. And, I'm not that I'm not dating myself by saying what year I graduated, but like, when I started in that job, like social media was just starting. Like I was the second ever person to be in that job, and Instagram had just launched. Like Twitter was young. Lots of other platforms didn't even exist in the way they do. Snapchat wasn't a thing. So it was really like a fun time, and also where you didn't had to have worked in digital marketing to get a job in digital marketing. Like you had the chance to crack in if you had the right other sets of skills.
How did those skills then launch you into an executive role where you're partnering friends with Kobe Bryant and you're working for the Jordan brand? How does someone get there as they just walk in the door and are writing tweets?
Yeah, that was a really special time, man. Like again, because digital was coming onto this thing and becoming such a priority. Prior to that, like everything was all about retail stores and all this. And because things were going digital, if you were an expert in digital, it allowed you to open some doors and become an expert and operate in ways that people who had been doing things the older way weren't able to. And so I think when I walked into Nike, my life experience was greater than my work experience. So that helped me. But also like my past life as an athlete allowed me to approach things in a way where I could take on tribulation, I could take on the grind, I could take on frustration. I could also relate, obviously, to athletes and stories we're telling. And so, like, those collective things and really being an athlete and having gone through the ups and downs and the perseverance and all that stuff, like for me, that ended up being a huge role in allowing me to persevere at Nike and just keep knocking on the door. And I just had to go above and beyond. Like if I would have just done my job, I wouldn't have had those other jobs.
Mm.
Like there was one point in time in my second year at Nike where I was doing two jobs at once, and I wasn't being paid for the second one. There was a need on another team, and I said, "Hey, I'll do it." Um, and they're like, "Great. Well, there's no money, so I just did both." But so I learned the first job well enough the first year,
Mm.
and then the second year, I held my hand up and I did both jobs for that year. And it was because of doing that second job at the same time as the first job that I got the chance to go work in the Jordan brand. The person that I worked under who didn't pay me advocated for me and gave me the chance to then go jump into this other role, which, you know, I walked in the first day and my new boss was like, "Hey, you have, I won't say the exact number, millions of dollars to spend this year. What are you going to do?" And I had come from a role where I didn't have any budget responsibility. So, um, it was a huge learning curve, but an awesome one. And all that work and the preparation and going to be above and beyond is what made it possible for me.
John, you pointed to your participation in sports, but I'm curious the deeper level there. Where does that motivation come from? Where does that drive come from? That willingness to see a need, find a way to meet it. You've mentioned that a couple times with the 2-on-1 work, with work at Nike. Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, I don't know exactly is the honest answer. Like I've just always had a drive to want to be successful, and that doesn't mean that a lot of that's been like slow grind and slow burn for me. And they don't go necessarily hand in hand. Like service is definitely a thing I care about, and getting to do that with 2-on-1 as an example was like an awesome way to combine for me something I was capable of doing and setting up. And then like, I believe we exist to serve and help people. And
Mm.
so that was a natural point in the journey for me. And then going above and beyond, I think I just saw that that was what was required in sports to excel. And that if you wanted to be great at something, you had to do the work
Mm.
above and beyond. Because if you just did the same amount of work as everybody else, there's probably somebody who's willing to outwork you or is more talented than you or is, just better than you in general. And so I think that experience with basketball just showed me like, hey, if you want something, if you want to advance, then you got to go extra mile.
You mentioned success and wanting to be great. And by all definitions, at least from worldly standards, you were successful at Nike. You were great. You were in positions of power and leadership and connection. And I would think anyone looking from the outside would say, man, John's made it. He has made it. And he's got the life that, for me being a school counselor, the second dream job is working at Nike, right? So I see that. I'm envious. I admire that. But then you stepped away from that. 2022, what was that shift for you? How did you then redefine success and great, or what prompted that? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think you got to back up for me to 2019. And so in 2019, there was a few different things going on. One, at that point, I now had two kids. So there was that element of my life going on, and they were both young still at that point. And I led this project at Nike. It was a really awesome project, and it was about a year and a half long. And I had been thrust into the sort of quarterback role of the project, and it was a lot of responsibility, a lot of like it was awesome. And I got to the end of the project and it was successful by everybody's standards. Hey, this was great. And so my boss the next week was like, "Hey, what do you want to do next?" And I was like, "Man, I have no idea what I want to do next. I haven't even thought about it. I've been so deep in this work,
Hmm.
no idea." So I said, "All right, give me a week. I need to go think about it." So I went, spent some time thinking, praying, reflecting, like what do I really want? And I went back to him the next week and I said, "Hey, I want my next job to be a job where I get to invest more in people rather than projects."
Hmm.
And the reason why I wanted that was because everything I learned at Nike, I shouldn't say everything. almost everything I learned at Nike, I learned by being thrown into the deep end of the pool and having to figure it out. And what I would have loved was that if there were some people teaching swimming lessons in the deep end that could have helped me
Right.
figure out how to swim better and faster or tread water better or whatever analogy you want to use, I wish I would have had some help. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. I could lead these big projects, but I think that I could actually help the next generation of people a lot more because I had to figure it all out myself.
Hmm.
And so that's a moment where things started to change for me. And then 2020, everybody knows 2020 and all the things that we'll always remember about it. But for me, there were a couple things that were going on that were like specific to me, my own challenges. So one, I was in this job at that point where I was the global brand director for Kobe Bryant. And so in January of 2020, he and his daughter and seven other amazing people passed away in that helicopter accident. So you had that going on. So that created a ripple and challenge, and also ended up being a huge honor for my life of getting to figure out what we did in response to that at Nike. But so you had that going on. You had obviously COVID and all this stuff. You had Nike reorging, and the reality was there was some point in time where I might not have a job. So all those things are swirling, and literally it could be like any day they're going to send me an email and say, "Hey, get on this Zoom call tomorrow, and we're going to tell you your fate." And so about 6 months into COVID, my wife Erin said to me like, "Hey, have you thought about moving east?" And at that point in time, I had not really thought much about it. And we'd talked some about it before. She's from Florida, so we had talked like maybe moving like Nashville or Raleigh or somewhere. But as long as I worked at Nike, that wasn't going to be a possibility. And so every time when we talked about it before, I was like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of this project, this thing. Let's come back to it later." But on this occasion, in the midst of all the uncertainty and the reality that Nike might come to me at any point in time and say, "Hey, you're out," um, I said, "Hey, I'm open to it." And she said, "Whoa, well, what are you scared of? Are you scared of leaving Nike?" I said, I'm not scared of leaving Nike, but I am scared of leaving my dad."
Hmm.
And, so my dad lived in the Salem area at that point. I was an only child, and my mom had passed away when I was 11. So even though my dad was remarried and I had step siblings who are all Saxon alums as well. So shout out the Leaper crew. Um, like the thought of leaving my dad and saying goodbye was going to be tough, even though he would have said to me, he would have said, "Go." Absolutely. And so we sort of sat there, and we're people of faith. Like our faith's really important to us. And so we decided we were going to pray for 40 days, see what God might show us in those 40 days. And so we started praying, and 5 days into praying, my dad slips in a parking lot and ends up with a traumatic brain injury, and ends up in the ICU. And we're like, "Wow, that's not really how we saw this going, but we'll keep praying and see what happens." And so we're praying, and I'm going to the hospital and seeing what's going, like it's all swirling. And we get to day 40 of our 40-day prayer journey, and on day 40, Nike says, "Hey, you have a job." They don't tell me this on day 39, not on 41, 40. And they say, "Hey, you got a job." And I'm like, "Okay, what's the job?" And they say that the job is to be the global brand director for running for men, which is a great job. Lots of people would want that job.
Hmm.
But it was a project job, not a people job. And so it wasn't a hey, you can choose a different job. There wasn't a buffet. This was
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up taking the job because I wasn't ready to take a severance that day. But it also gave me a lot of freedom because I knew that the job wasn't the job I wanted, and they couldn't tell me when I could have the job that I want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I got off Zoom that night and Erin and I talked, she's like, "Well, what do you feel like God said?" I said, "I feel like He said you can choose. I trust you. So, it's up to you guys." And we decided we were going to wait and see what was going to happen with my dad, because at that point it was really unclear. Is he gonna fully recover? Is he going to be fully dependent for the rest of his life? Like, what's going to happen? And so, unfortunately, like 20 days later, his body and his brain just couldn't get on the same page, and he ended up passing away.
Hmm.
And when the dust all settled from that, I basically just told my wife, like, "Hey, life's really short. Your parents are about retirement age. They want to be in the mix." At that point, then we had 3 boys. all locked inside, as everybody who lives in
Mhm.
Oregon remembers in what COVID was like. We're locked in with the chaos, and so I said, "Hey, I think we need to go be close to your parents." And so that started the journey to head east and do that. And in doing so, Nike was working remotely still at that point. The office in Portland was closed for 2 years, so it didn't have a big impact on whether I did the job in Beaverton where we were living or if I did it from Florida. So we moved and I did that, and I worked remotely for a year and a half for them before the office reopened, and they're sort of like, "Hey, are you coming back?" And I told them no,
Mm.
and I had to make a different choice at that point in time, and it was hard, and we missed lots of things about Oregon and all the relationships that we don't get to see very often these days. But at that point in time for us, it felt like the best thing that we needed was to be near to family, since both my mom and my dad were no longer alive, and
Mhm.
Aaron's parents were.
Yeah, grief is not a stranger to you, and your story is and your journey is marked by these moments of grief. I'm curious for you, what have you learned through grief, if you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've learned a lot about grief. So part of that is it's given me an urgency about life, because I'm just so aware that you don't know how much time that you get or that your loved ones get. So that's a huge part of my story, and I don't want to take anything that I have or any of the time I have with anybody for granted. And that was part of the choice to want to move east. I think too, grief is not linear. It's all over the place. One day you might be fine, another day you might be, a wreck. And the hardest day I ever had after my mom died on February 2nd, and the hardest February 2nd I ever had was the 10th one.
Mm.
And I don't know why specifically, but like I literally remember that day so vividly. Um, in a way that none of the other anniversaries of her passing ever have. And so it's not linear. And then the third one I'd just say is like, I didn't go see a therapist until I was 26. And there was a lot of things that I just hadn't processed, even though I'd had a bunch of support and a lot of love. There were some parts of my life, specifically like my love life.
Mm.
We're not going in there too deep, but like I just couldn't let anybody in. Because I hadn't processed what it meant to lose the woman who had been closest to me in my life, and I hadn't prepared to do that work. And so finally at 26, I went and saw a counselor, went through the process, worked through a lot of my stuff and feelings that allowed me to be able to like actually open myself up to be able to be in a place to get married. So when my dad died, I called the therapist who I'd never seen before, but I had a relationship with, and I said, "Hey," this was like 2 weeks after my dad died. I was like, "Hey, I don't necessarily think I need this. There's not one exact thing I'm coming to you to talk about right now, but I don't want to do the same thing I did before and wait 15 years to
Mm.
start processing how I'm feeling and what's gone on and how that impacts me." And so that was a really healthy and positive change for me in the aftermath of my dad's death.
You have been writing newsletters with Worthy Wins, and one thing that I have just been struck by is the vulnerability that you write through. And each one that comes out always has some really tangible examples. And you've been so open about that journey with grief. And I appreciate that. Just having been in a season myself with grief, that it has been a helpful way of processing my own grief, and then acknowledging like someone else has been through this on a very deep and profound level. One, I just want to thank you for that. It's been a gift to me to read, and also encourage anyone who's listening right now that those emails, to me, it comes through email on a weekly basis, have been just instrumental in my own processing. And I would really recommend anyone to check it out. How can they sign up for that newsletter? How can they sign up to hear from you?
Yeah, you can sign up for the newsletter at worthywins.co. There's a simple little sign up form. I won't spam you or anything like that. I'm just trying to help and encourage people on their journey to win in the places that matter most in their lives.
Yeah, share more about Worthy Wins. What's the genesis of that? What are you doing with that? I know it's now turning into a book coming out here on June 10th. Congratulations to that effect as well. But talk about Worthy Wins a bit.
Yeah, thank you. So shortly after my dad passed, I started doing some reflection about what really matters. And, my dad, I told you before, like my dad's passing made me reminded me about life being short, but I was half his age when he passed away. And so like, it had a very, like that tangible thing of like, oh, if I live to be as old as he was, then I'm halfway done. That puts some urgency to say, well, if I'm halfway done, that means my time is running out and I want to make sure that I spend it in places that really matter. And so it just left me exploring like what really matters. Like that's really what it was. And so I started writing a newsletter. Um, I would send it to like 100 friends and just basically as a way to encourage them. I wasn't necessarily preaching at them or like trying to force anything on them. More so like my perspective is a little bit unique, I think, for most people my age because both my parents are no longer alive. And so I don't want other people to wait or miss out on things because they think that they have more time than they do. When that call comes or that text comes or the moment comes and the people that you love the most are either dead or seriously hurt or, can no longer do what they used to do, everything changes in an instant. And so like for me, it's just my way of wanting to encourage people on their journey. And so as I wrote those emails over time, people would be like, hey, this is really great. Like keep sharing, keep sharing. And then finally, like 3 times in one day, about a year and a half ago, 3 different people like basically were like, hey, I think you should write a book. I think you should write a book. I think you should write a book. So I said, all right, I'm going to write a book. And so the book is really taking this culmination of what I learned about winning at Nike and combining it with my personal journey and ultimately just trying to help people get really clear about what matters most to them. And then to be able to take simple steps to succeed in those areas in their lives. It's not a big complex thing. Like there's plenty of complex and deep things that you can do, but like if anybody's in a season of life like me where you have a lot going on and you got work and you got family and you got kids and you got friends, like there's not a whole lot of time to just like get super complex. If we can be really clear about what's most important to us and we can then apply simple strategies to succeed in those places, like that's ultimately pointing our life towards the things that matter most. And that we'll look back and say, hey, that was worth it. Like that was worth all the effort, time to make sure that we win with the people and in the places that really matter.
I've been struck by the simple concept of the encouragement that you give through the newsletter. So I'm pumped for the book. But what would you say is the simplest way if I'm talking to a high school student here in my office, or I am someone who's just listening right now? What's the simplest way for me or that student or whoever's listening to adopt that worthy wins mindset into and integrate into our life?
Each season of life has it's going to be slightly different for a high school student. They got the world's their oyster and they have so much in front of them. So it's slightly different, but the principles are the same. And if I was sitting down with a high school student or a college student or anybody, you can look at it 2 ways. You can just say, hey, what do I want to be true at the end of my life? Which again, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, that feels like so far off. But it also could be just like, hey, what do you want to be true at the end of your high school experience?
Hmm.
Because ultimately, what I believe is there's 2 parts to worthy wins that are different than what the world tells us. The world tells us that it's all about what you accomplish. And so go accomplish things, go accomplish, go accomplish, go accomplish. But all the data and the science and the research in the world, right, points to the people that are the most fulfilled in their lives are the people that have the best relationships. And so for me, it's not that accomplishments don't matter. It's that the goal of your life would be that you don't overinvest so much in accomplishments that you underinvest in the relationships that are most important to you. And
That's
so,
powerful.
yeah. And the reason why I say it that way is because what I learned at Nike, the most important thing I learned at Nike was that the only way to succeed, to truly win, is if you get extremely clear about it, because winning is subjective. It means something different for you, Ryan, than it does for me. Just like it would mean something different to any single high school kid that comes in and sits in your office and wants to talk about life. Like ultimately, success is going to be different for each of us. But in order to actually reach that success that we want to get to, we have to take the time to pause to say, what does success actually look like for me? And that's where the who and the what comes into play. Who are the people that matter the most to me, whether that's in this season or for the rest of my life? And then what are the accomplishments that matter the most to me that I really want to go after? And it doesn't mean that means they get the exact equal amount of investment. Like the other thing that I'm more sure of than ever is that like life's not about walking a perfect tightrope. It's not about being perfectly balanced and expecting that you can just stay on the line and stay on it forever, because that's not how great things are accomplished. But you also can't so far overinvest that you never bring the relational aspect back in to make sure that those relationships that you say you care about most are actually getting the investment that they take, because a relationship's not a relationship unless you're investing time into it.
Bam. Yeah, absolutely. And that launches us perfectly into our four big questions. A lot of them you've talked about a bit, but let me focus on this one. And these are brought to us by, as always, the Saxon Success Fund. And if anyone listening has not heard of this nonprofit organization that is producing some incredible students here at South, please go to saxonsuccessfund.org and consider giving, especially right now in our scholarship season with students. This is a great way to invest in that next generation of leaders and learners directly. And again, you can visit saxonsuccessfund.org. So John, first question for you. Knowing who you are today, all that you've been up to, you talked about those relationships. Who has made it possible?
Oh man. Well, I think back, if I'm going back to high school, if Coach Rick Havercroft hadn't handed me the keys to be the point guard of the basketball team my senior year,
We would
doesn't
have
mean
beat you. We would have beat you. That's it.
you wouldn't
Sprague
have.
would have
But
won.
but instead you didn't.
5 overtimes.
My life wouldn't be incomplete or anything like that, but my life would look different, and I wouldn't have played college basketball probably, and I wouldn't have played overseas. And, it doesn't mean any of these other things wouldn't have happened, but my life would look different. So Coach Havercroft played a huge role in my life. Secondly, and it's not in any order, but I was thinking about from the South Salem lens, but my dad, when my mom died, my dad gave up his life for me. Like, so I was 11, sixth grade, like he laid down everything. He started working from home. He would pick me up from school and drive me to the hoop and drop me off and come back and get me 4 hours later. And, like he laid down his life for me. And like in the like dedication portion of the book, like I just talk about my dad showed me what worthy wins were by the way that he lived. And so I would not be where I'm at today if that hadn't happened. So those are two really important ones.
Yeah, I remember your dad being at everything, just being that loyal companion, that's steady for you. And yeah, what a gift growing up. That's huge. Question 2, if you went back again to your high school self, what would this version of John, what kind of advice would you give that high school version?
I think the version of myself now, and again, somebody who's processed their grief and their wounds and their pieces, would tell the high school version of me that it's okay to not please everybody, and it's okay to not try to be best friends with everybody. But I was operating out of my own woundedness of wanting as much relationship as possible because my mom had passed away. And so I didn't want to lose anybody. I wanted to be friends with everybody. In fact, I still want to be friends with everybody. And I just don't have the time to do that. But the other thing that my current self would tell my old self was, because like I just told you, right? Like if Coach Havercroft didn't give me the keys to that thing, I wouldn't have made it. But I would remind my junior year self when I was thinking about quitting, because he said, hey, you have to play junior varsity. I would have told myself, no, don't quit, keep going. That doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. That doesn't mean that the keys are going to be handed to you. But by not quitting, I left the door open, and that changed me. And it also meant if I would have just gone through my senior year, not played much, been on the bench, lost to Sprague, whatever, like, I still would have had this tool of basketball that I could have taken and applied to almost any other area. I could have been a manager at a program. I could have walked on somewhere. There were lots of things that could have come. And so I would tell my high school self, don't quit, keep going. Like, even if you're frustrated or feel like you're getting the short end of the stick, like, you never know what's going to happen. And there is value in that sweat equity, regardless of what the outcome is.
And such an important message for our students to hear too, especially this day and age where there is so much at the fingertips for our youth. There's so much there, so many doors that are open, that oftentimes there's a lot of paralysis by analysis, or there's a lot of apathy towards, well, gosh, if I've got everything available to myself, it's going to work out at some point. And so I'll just stop, this feels good now, this feels good now. And I'm ping ponging between all these different things. And I love that message of kind of that resilience and that stick-to-itiveness. And even when you're faced with a barrier or faced with an obstacle, the willingness to work through that and to see it as a different type of opportunity for you. I think it's such an important message. Question 4, I'll skip 3 because we talked about it, but 4, if you could transform South Salem High School, or if you could transform public education or the messages that our students are receiving, how would you infuse the work you're doing now into a culture of learning at a high school level?
That's a great question. I think what I would infuse is that I would just want people to think about the end in mind as they take action. Again, they're developing and young and they're figuring out their lives. And so like it's not an expectation about being perfect, but what I believe is that if you're really clear about the outcome you're trying to achieve, about what success looks like, it acts as a filter for you to make decisions and decide what is worth it and what is not. And oftentimes for young people, when there's not a big thing they're going after, it's really hard to go after that big thing because you don't know what it is. And so without going too deep into it, I think we're all meant, Ryan, to live a meaningful story. Like that is like we are meant for that. And there's 4 pillars in my deduction of what a meaningful story is. So the first one is it's personal. And I told you this before, right? Like my story is not yours and yours is not mine and it's nobody else's, but we all have a personal story and we're all made in a certain way. And so we're like, to have a meaningful story, we got to live into that. I can't try to be you and you can't try to be me. So that's the starting point. Secondly, every meaningful story is intentional. And so it's put in a specific direction to go after something. And so without being intentional, it's really hard to live a meaningful story. The third one is it's challenging. And this is hard because like when you're in the midst of hard stuff, like you don't actually enjoy that. Like it's not fun suffering. It wasn't fun when, I was having to do JV practice and varsity practice my junior year and I wasn't playing on varsity and the coach would, like he was basically, hey, sorry, I don't know if you're going to get in the game. That wasn't fun. But it was part of me going after the bigger thing. And like one of the greatest story consultants around, this guy named Robert McKee, he says the only way stories move forward is through conflict. That is how we progress. And so if it's not challenging you, it's probably not meaningful. And then the fourth one is that it's purposeful. That it's something that's bigger than yourself. That there's something greater you're going after. The greatest stories you've ever read, every book, movie, the things you look at and you admire, like they're about people who went after something bigger, a bigger aim, a bigger something they wanted to change in the world or a person they wanted to impact their life in. And so those 4 pillars, personal, intentional, challenging, and purposeful, like if you can lean into those as a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, you're on your way towards making sure that you're spending the limited time you have in high school. Because even as a high school kid, you think you have infinite time, but you still only got those 4 years. So how do you want to use them to actually lead towards something that's going to add up to something you're going to be proud of at the end? And so that's what I would want to see at South Salem High School.
Well, I'm going to adopt that. Wrote it down. Those 4 pillars is such a great framework to. We were just in classrooms this last week teaching our 9th graders about purpose and about that the world that's greater than ourselves, and however they define it. It is a personal definition, but that this provides a really excellent opportunity to put some tangible things in place with those students. Yeah, I know we're running up against time here, so I want to be mindful of that. 2 questions for you, 2 last questions for you that I can think of. One, who else should we invite onto this? Whose story should we tell?
Oh man, good question. From our class, I think Alex Casebury has a great story. Maybe you've had him on.
Not yet, but he's on the short list.
He's on the list. He's in town there. Matt Tuttle has a great story and would add a ton of value. Man, you got me on the hook here. Zane Selbach has an awesome story. I mean, I could go. I'll send you a list of people who have awesome stories and have done amazing things. But it's a really remarkable set of people there, man.
Yeah, it's an incredible. It has filled my own job with so much passion and purpose. Being able to have these interviews, provide the spotlight, turn it on to some incredible work that's being done outside of our community and even here at South as well. So, John, any last shout outs you want to give?
There's
I
too
know.
many. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I'm eternally grateful
Mm.
to South and the relationships there. And I don't get back to Salem very often these days, or nor do I get to connect with or see that many of my classmates that often. But I'm grateful for those people. And I just thought of one more story that's really, really great. You might have, amongst others, Charles Talley.
Haven't heard
Charles,
that one yet.
he has a great story, man.
Okay.
And amongst others. Like I said, there's lots, but
Yeah.
yeah, super grateful for you for reaching out to me and giving me the chance to be a part of this, and just for the impact you're having at South, especially being a Sprague guy to start with, man.
I had to get that one in. John, you have been someone that I have deeply admired and looked up to for so many years. And every interaction I have with you is always such a gift. And I always leave feeling like you have built me up, even in the short conversations that we have. You've always taken time to be intentional and in the ways you've mentored me, even in a 30-second conversation. Just it's provided such fruit in my life, faith in my life. And so I thank you for the opportunity to connect on a little deeper level, for sharing your story today, for being someone that we can spotlight, and I can turn your story into, so many opportunities for kids to learn from. The students I work with are going to look at you and go, I want that. I want to be more like that. I want more information on that. And so if that's the case, how can anyone get a hold of you? How can we follow you? What plug do you have for the work you're doing?
Yeah, appreciate it. You can find me on social media just at John Olinger. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can look me up at john-olinger.com and reach out.
Please do it. Anyone who's listening, follow John. I promise you it will be worth it. And June 10th, that book is out. You can pre-order it now. So find that anywhere that sells books. John's there, and his story is as well. John, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you. Be well.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you, man.
That does it for our conversation with John Olinger. Big shout out to J.O. his willingness to jump on the pod with us. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. We are almost wrapped up for the school year, which means we'll take a summer off from running any spotlights. Feel free to dip back into our archives, listen to any of the prior conversations. We've got one more coming for you next week. That'll be the official close for the school year and season 2 of the Always a Saxon podcast. So thanks again for supporting us. Please also consider supporting the Saxon Success Fund. And also a big shout out to Matt Cox and Saucetown Properties. That's it for now. Go Saxons.